A major development for Williams ahead of the F1 2019 season. Is there any better time to get rid of your technical director than just over a week before the first race? Probably. I have Scott Mitchell and Ed Straw here to talk to me about what's going on at Williams. We know the team is in trouble. We know they're going to be at the back. But Paddy Lowe is now on his way out of the team, taking leave ahead of the 2019 season. And Scott, what is going on at Williams? You were involved in writing the story that broke on autosport.com and motorsport.com. What's happened? We've already discussed the fact that, is Lowe's future in doubt? That's been a discussion topic throughout testing, but now he's gone. Yeah,
it's manifested itself as taking a leave of absence from the team for personal reasons, which is, I think, as you described it, Ed, is quite HR speak, isn't it? For the team competitively, it's been a horrible 15 months or so, really. It's not been great for Paddy Lowe or the team. And it's just been a continuation of factors and problems from the awful 2018 car that left them last in the championship to the production delays that led to them missing the first 2.5 days of testing, and now there's talk about them having to revise fairly significant elements of the design because they might not necessarily be legal. So one thing after another. I'm not hugely surprised, to be honest. The only thing that surprised me slightly is that they've done it on the eve of the season. That is obviously hugely disruptive, but for whatever decision has actually been made, and it hasn't been properly communicated what this really means for Lowe's long-term future. All we can say is that the consequence of what's happened over the last few weeks has finally sort of played out tangibly, and where Williams go from here is pretty much anybody's guess.
Now with Lowe, does the fact that he's the man carrying the can for this mean that effectively all the blame is laid at his door?
Well, he was quite keen to make clear in Spain last week in testing that blaming one person wouldn't be particularly wise, and nor would getting rid of someone at the top, because you don't necessarily eliminate the problems, and you do shove their experience and the lessons that come with battling problems out of the door. But he was Chief Technical Officer. Claire Williams at the start of 2019 made it clear that their big, not reshuffle necessarily, but all the changes they wanted to make behind the scenes, whether it was culture related, whether it was making sure they had the right people in the right places and making sure that they had the ability to make best use of the impressive resources that are available at Williams. That was all Paddy. That was all down to his technical leadership, as was the fairly abysmal 2018 car, and as was ultimately the build and quality of the 2019 car, which was late to get to testing and then slow when it got testing, and ultimately making sure the car's legal is probably under the remit of the Chief Technical Officer as well. So not saying that Paddy is to blame for Williams being in a major mess, not saying that getting rid of him is ultimately going to suddenly turn them into podium challengers again, but when you're in that really senior technical position and lots of technical things go wrong, it's difficult to see how you can't ultimately, fall on your sword.
Ed, Williams, we know, have been on a gradual decline that seems to have steepened in the last couple of years since a great 2014 season. Lowe, when he came in a couple of years ago, wasn't able to change that path. So now he's on his way out. Do Williams need to have a complete change with whichever direction they go in from this point?
Well, clearly something's got to change, hasn't it? They're not going in the right direction, but as Scott alluded to, Paddy Lowe is not the root of all Williams' problems. The problems started long before he was there, and they'll probably continue now that he's out of the picture. They need to understand what's at the heart of their underachievement. They had very lofty ambitions under Paddy Lowe. He wants to make them a top team. I think probably maybe underestimate how big a challenge it was to get a team that's at Williams' size up to what he was used to at Mercedes. Tried to address that. That's obviously not worked with this year. So I think it's multifold. Williams needs to decide what kind of team it is, and whether that involves looking at whether it needs to become a more allied team to one of the big teams. That's one debate for them to have. And they also need to get to the root of the problems, which are ultimately aerodynamic. Your aero is the key to performance, fundamentally. That's the main performance differentiator. The other big one is the engine. They've got a Mercedes engine. That's clearly not the problem. So what I'd probably like to see is maybe a technical director with more of an aero background. The people they've had, Paddy Lowe, Pat Simmons, Mike Coughlin, Mark Gunn, they've had various technical leaders over the years since they've basically since Patrick Head. But it's anyone's guess who they need. They've tried to go for the mega bucks guy. Paddy Lowe was on several million a year. He was a guy who'd been there at Mercedes, been there, done that. So he was a big name signing. They saw him as the guy to fix it. And in reality, when you're talking a team of this size with over 600 people, it's a bit of a myth to think that one individual is going to transform everything. But the trouble is, this has happened at Williams again and again and again and again. The first thing I'd like to see them do is set realistic expectations. I think they need to be creative with their technical leadership, whether that means that they go with what they've got. I guess the senior engineer now there is Doug McKiernan, who does have an aero background. Whether they want to do it with that and the department heads, a bit like Sauber did a few years ago when they were on hard times, or whether they want to pick a technical director, maybe who hasn't been a technical director before, who's got a good reputation, maybe with an aero background, and have a bit of a punt and back someone. Because if you think about it, why would you go to Williams at this stage? Someone like, for example, Andrew Green, doing a brilliant job at Racing Point. How much would you have to pay him to go to Williams? There's probably not enough money in the world to do it. It's getting to the point where they can't just keep, like a struggling football scene, going from different manager to different manager to different manager. Sometimes you've got to say, well, actually, maybe the manager's not the problem. Maybe we need to look at the whole thing and really, really sort things out. It's not easy. There's going to be a lot of pressure on the team to get this next decision right.
Lowe, as you mentioned there, was at Mercedes before he came to Williams, so he did go there with lofty ambitions, and he's got a fantastic CV. He's been in F1 for a long time and been around the paddock and worked for a lot of teams and had a lot of success. Where does he go from here? What's his next move going to be? And would you both expect to see him return to F1 at another team?
I think someone with that CV will always appeal. He's got 30 years in Formula One. He's there for a reason. He was Chief Technical Officer of Williams for a reason. He had success at Mercedes and McLaren for a reason. There might not be such a favourable deal on the table, but there'll come a point where another team wants to look at him and think, well, we need somebody. Here's a guy who's got the experience and the knowledge to play some part, whether it's as a technical director or in another role. So, yeah, it's too strong a CV for people not to think about him. Whether he wants to is another matter. You know, he's made plenty of money. He's been very successful, so he could afford to go and do something else, whether it's within Formula One in the long term or elsewhere in engineering as a broad industry.
It could be that he joins the legion of former Williams employees that now work for F1 in some capacity as an aero consultant or various engineering consultants.
Ross Brawn's band of merry men.
Yeah, exactly. But I agree with Ed. Lowe's CV speaks for itself. Okay, it's been tarnished a little bit over the last couple of years. There will be some people, I'm sure, that sort of think maybe this exposes sort of to what extent he was part of that Mercedes success, but I think it would be churlish to say that he didn't play a significant role in it. I'm sure there'll be an opportunity for him to come back sooner rather than later, just whether it's the right one for him and whether the team in question actually thinks he's still up to the task.